More than 40,000 Palestinians have now been killed in Gaza, a majority of whom are civilians. And these numbers are from the Palestinian Ministry of Health, but they are backed up by the United States, by international organizations. Humanitarian conditions in Gaza have degraded so much that diseases like polio and hepatitis A are now spreading. We have seen countless children be orphaned. We have seen countless mothers lose their children. How much is too much, sir? At what point is it time to end this war?
Well, we'll end the war when we achieve our war goals of making sure that Hamas can't repeat such atrocities. But we're fighting this war in a just war with just means. In fact, with means that no other army has ever fought. No other army has taken the precautions that Israel has taken, sometimes at great risk, to make sure that we minimize the number of casualties. You talked about polio. We enabled now massive vaccination of polio. We want 90% of the Gazan people of Gaza vaccinated. I think 200,000 I think were vaccinated today. We put in 1 million tons of food, 1 million tons of aid, 700,000 tons of food. That's unheard of. We've taken, because we think that every civilian death is a tragedy.
Greetings one and all. Super Sundays here in the Holy Land, the holy city of Elon Moreh Shechem. We are on the 24th day of Cheshvan 5785. Our class, with God's help, is extremely, extremely important. Please take note and go over it and pass it on. Share it with other people. This message is not being heard. And it is must. Title of today's class series, Who the Hell is Responsible? The death toll since October 7th, 782 Jewish soldiers have been murdered by the Islamo-Nazis. 903 civilians have been murdered by the Islamo-Nazis. 76 security service police personnel have been murdered by the Islamo-Nazis. A total of 1,761 Jews murdered in the last 12 months, 13 months. Who the hell is responsible? Maybe some of us believe that the Arabs are responsible. Yes, of course, they're responsible. But we always have to look to the source. When the temples were destroyed, the nations did not destroy the temple. The temple was destroyed by the Jewish people. The nations just came by and went and blew the house down. That's all they did. It was our actions, negative actions, our deeds, negative, which really destroyed the temples, and that is life. The nations do not have control over us. They would not be able to pull off such a tragedy. 1761. We have to look within. Yes, how are we responsible for this calamity, this tragedy, this disaster? And when we look inside ourselves, we will find the answers. And it ain't pretty. Number one, listen to this. In the last couple of years, the IDF eliminated 6 divisions. Closed. Goodbye. So long. Reserve duty. Goodbye, guys. How much is a division? Each division runs somewhere between 13,000 and 20,000 soldiers. So if we go somewhere in the middle and times it by 6, let's just say 15,000 is a division in the army. So they just took off the field, the battlefield, 90,000 soldiers. Listen to that number again. But it's more. They eliminated 24 brigades. How much is each brigade? Each brigade contains between 3,000 and 7,000 soldiers. So once again, if we go somewhere in the middle here, and we times it by 24, we have another 120,000 soldiers. Goodbye. We don't need you. We don't need you. We need a small, smart army. We don't need real soldiers protecting. We need the Air Force and a small, smart, technological army. So they closed the infantry. Over 200,000 soldiers. Goodbye. Amazing. Look at them running after, you gotta laugh, running after the religious, the Haredi community. We need soldiers. That is really interesting. Well, at the tip of a finger, you could bring all the 220,000 soldiers back into duty. Oh, but they need the few thousand Haredi soldiers. Very interesting. Who need to begin to train. They have people that are trained. But that's a different subject for a different time. How many times has Jabalia, in its 4 kilometers north of Gaza City, how many times has Israel captured Jabalia, a refugee camp? I'm not talking about going back in the last 20 years, last 20 years. I know personally people that conquered. I have friends that were part of the troops 20 years ago, 19 years ago, that conquered Jabalia. I'm not talking about going back 19 years and 15 years in all of these funky name wars that has been going on between Israel and Gaza. I'm not talking about that. How many lives have been given for the same stupid place? Once again, this is just an example of many other places. 4 times. Just this past 13 months. We've gone there, conquered it, left, and they came back. And we had to go back. How many Jews have sacrificed on the altar of the IDF, on the altar of the government, have given their lives to conquer a place that was conquered? This is criminal. Criminal. Who the hell is responsible? Look in the mirror. Humanitarian aid. OMG. Listen, I looked for days, statistics. Maybe somebody could help me. I really looked for a couple of days. It's really hard to get up-to-date statistics. They're so humongous. The amount of humanitarian aid that Israel has sent into their enemies, into these Nazis, is mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. I have, once again, these are statistics from March, April. Okay, so that's going back. But it will give us an idea. It will give us enough of an upset stomach, nausea, a vomiting. How in the world, on one hand, with one hand you fight your enemies, and on the other hand you feed your enemies? It don't jive together. Who the hell is responsible? We're responsible. We've lost it. Supplying our enemies with food, with water, with fuel. Keep the tunnels going. You need fuel so you could breathe down there. So this is back in March. 140 trucks daily. That's 252,585 tons of food, 3 million cubic meters of water, 197 fuel tanks, 1,705 trucks with medical aid. We're talking about a daily basis. In March, we're in November. Remember? So we know the leaders, so-called leaders. OMG, if these are leaders, we're really in hot water. We know the IDF, we know these security services and their responsibility for this Holocaust, 1761. The Holocaust of 1761, 1,761 Jews. God forbid tomorrow or today that number should not grow. But there are other people that are damn responsible for this calamity. Rabbis, certain rabbis. Let me read you from the J-Post. Last week, scenes of anarchy broke out at 2 Israeli military facilities. Activists, along with members of the government, broke into and mobbed these bases to protest the Army's investigation of 9 soldiers who stand accused of abusing Arab detainees. Folks, if you listen to that a couple of times and you don't puke, something is wrong with you. There was a need to have a demonstration. There was a need to break in where the judicial procedure was going on against these 9 soldiers, that they abused 9 Arab murderers. Got that? Think about that one. Swallow that one slowly. Many, including myself, this rabbi, he writes in the end that he is a writer, he's a rabbi, and he's president and also the head of a certain yeshiva in the outskirts of Jerusalem. So I guess he is a man of many titles. I won't tell you what his first title should be. We're in a holy place here. And yet, continuing on with this article, and yet I can't stop thinking about the scenes from the prison riots and the growing trend of extremism amongst fellow religious Zionist Jews. After all, many in the mob looked like me and my students, guys who wear kippot, skull caps, and tzitzit, the fringes, just like those in the mob. And we too are in a state of mourning, M-O-U-R, and anger post October 7th. In another shocking instance of Jewish extremism this week, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said that blocking humanitarian aid to Gaza may be justified, even if it causes the death of 2 million civilians. This is a topic for another class. There ain't no 2 million civilians in Gaza. This is a lie that is parroted by so many ignoramuses. But that's a different topic for a different class. How many people are really in Gaza? It looks much better in the news when there's 2 million people, suffering. Yeah. Such comments must draw swift condemnation, for they are against the mandate of Jewish law. Sources in Jewish law, including Talmud, Gittin, 61a, write that down. Don't worry, there's nothing else to write down because that's the only specific source given. Then Maimonides, and then Rabbi Yosef Karo in the Code of Jewish Law. Very impressive, ha 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 ha, Rabbi, head of the yeshiva. Wow, is that the best you can do? Is that the best you can do? You can give us one little Talmud tractate, Gittin 61a, and then give us names of commentaries, Maimonides, Rabbi Yosef Karo. Thank you very much. Such comments to stop the aid to these Amalekim, to these Nazis, should be swiftly condemned because they are against Torah, they are against Jewish law. Do you hear this? Who the hell is responsible for this Holocaust? Well, look in the mirror, Rabbi. You're one of them, and your peers. It is crystal clear. Ooh. Get that crystal ball out. It is crystal clear that we have a responsibility to help civilians who are hungry, Jews or otherwise. So how can Smotrich make such a statement? Similar actions and extremist hateful rhetoric have been brewing for months or years, and too many of the religious leaders and educators have failed to condemn them. For months, there's been an increase in Jewish Israeli residents of Judea and Samaria acting violently against local Arabs, ransacking villages, damaging property, beating up residents, often with the support of right-wing politicians. This is amazing. If we looked at the statistics of Jews being attacked and murdered, rock attacks, Molotov, shooting attacks, stabbings, carjacks. It is unbelievable. It is unbelievable to, how can you say in the same breath? You could talk about a few incidents involving Jews. I'm not even getting into them. What really happened there? Nothing to do with what he writes beating up residents, damaging property. No. But forget that. Even if it was true, how in the world do you put your focus on what a few Jews supposedly did to Arabs and the masses doing to Jews? Amazing. He goes further, the rabbi, the head of the yeshiva. At this year's annual Jerusalem Day celebration, marking Israel's victory in the 1967 Six-Day War, some extremists marched through the Muslim quarter in the Old City, chanting, "Death to the Arabs." Once again, I know people that were there. Maybe there were 2 or 3 people chanting that, but I guess it deserves a headline here by the rabbi. All of these incidents and behavior patterns, right? He's talking about going and protesting against this judicial procedure that's taking place against 9 soldiers who so-called abused Arab murdering Nazi Amalekim. He's talking about Smotrich making a statement perhaps to stop the humanitarian aid, so-called humanitarian aid into Gaza. He's talking about the residents of Judea and Samaria, the Jewish residents. All this tarnishes the soul of our people. Oh my God. Folks, check out your soul to see if it's still pure. You've been contaminated by the likes of these religious extremists like Smotrich. National leaders, as well as community and educational leaders, especially in the Jewish religious school system, need to condemn behavior. This is counter to our values. Very interesting. Counter to our values. Okay, folks, put on a couple of seatbelts. Yes. Here we go. This is going to be probably a 2 or 3 part series, but it's a must. Share, like. Folks, we are limited. What we could do by YouTube has limited us in getting out this class. You could help us get it out, whatever venue you put it out. This message has to be heard. This rabbi, he's able to put an article in the Jerusalem Post, which is read by hundreds of thousands of people. Our message is not getting out. Let's not be responsible for not getting the message out. Let us have a share in getting the message out, please. Okay. The rabbi quoted 3 sources. Quoted the Talmud, Gittin 61a. He didn't quote, he mentioned Maimonides, he mentioned Rabbi Yosef Karo of the codifier of the Jewish Code of Jewish Law. Okay, let's look at it. Let's take a real look. Let's take a real look at these sources. So, step number 1. We have 2 sources. 61a, as he said, we'll add to that 59b. In there, the Mishnah and the Talmud, I summarize, brings down the following ideas. That when a Jew is giving charity to other Jews, if in the surroundings there are non-Jews, a Jew should give charity also to the non-Jew. I remember I was on a speaking tour in the States years ago, and there was a Chabad shul that prayed with the sunrise. I mean, maybe you're not going to believe me, like Chabad, you're thinking they start at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, you know? But yeah, believe it or not, there in Los Angeles, there was a Chabad. They had a sunrise minyan prayer service. So anyways, I remember when I was 3 or 4 days in Los Angeles and I went to this synagogue, in the front there was a black person, non-Jew, and people would come into the synagogue. He would be sitting there on a chair. It was actually a woman who was sitting there on the chair, and people would give. People gave charity to this woman. That's the idea. In order that we should not instigate hatred against the Jewish people, right? We're in exile, we're a minority, and therefore we don't want to raise any eyebrows, any red signals. Number two, we have when a Jew is visiting fellow Jews who are, God forbid, sick. Let's say he's in a hospital and there's a Gentile next to the Jewish person. You should also visit and take an interest in what's going on with this sick non-Jew. Last but not least, when the Jewish people are burying other Jews, and they happen to notice that there are Gentiles that are not buried, are lying outside dead, just lying about. So therefore, in order to keep the peace, we also bury the Gentile corpse, not just the Jewish ones. Now, of course, not in the Jewish cemetery, that goes without saying, but we do participate. Once again, so we have three laws so far. We have charity, this is all in the Mishnah and all in the Talmud, and we have visiting the sick, and we have burying the dead. Comes the Tosefta. The Tosefta in Gittin, the chapter 3, law 18. It brings down there an additional angle to this law. And it says the following: we pay our condolences to non-Jews just as we pay condolences to Jews. So an added dimension to this law. It's very understandable, very clear. We don't want to make waves. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to endanger the Jewish people. They'll say, look, they take care of their own, but they don't take care of other people. They're not interested. Okay, that is what it says. True, 100%. Maimonides. Okay, the rabbi brought down Maimonides. Of course, he didn't bring down any details, just like in the Talmud, he didn't bring down any details. But we will. There are 5 places, it's a lot, 5 places in Maimonides that he brings down these concepts of keeping, we'll call it one law for all people. It's brought down in the Laws of Kings, Chapter 10, Law 12. Laws of Mourning, M-O-U-R. Chapter 14, Law 12. Stealing, Chapter 11, Law 3. Gifts to the poor people, Chapter 7, Law 7. Last but not least, the laws of foreign worshiping, Chapter 10, Law 6. I will take the last one. As we say, last but not least, I will take the last law and I will read it to you. It says the following: we finance poor Gentiles like we do poor Jews. We do not attempt to halt attempts of non-Jews gathering up various produce in fields of Jews, which is left for poor Jews. In the land of Israel, where it is a commandment, it's a mitzvah to work the land. The Khatam Sofer writes in his questions and answers that working the land of Israel is the same as putting on tefillin, phylacteries, on your hand and on your head. Amazing. So it's a commandment. So we have various many commandments that are connected to fields and produce. One of them is that we have to leave certain amount of produce for poor people to come into our fields and gather up produce for themselves. So we do not put a stop sign, we do not put guards at the entrance to the fields in order to keep out non-Jews. Same idea here. But the Maimonides adds a very interesting twist. These laws pertain when the Jewish nation is not sovereign and not strong in their land. However, when they are strong and sovereign in their land, we do not allow non-Jews who do not keep the 7 commandments of Noah to reside in our land. Very interesting. We can understand where you don't want to rock the boat, when you're a minority, when you're not in your land. Got it. 100% more power. Got it. Let's not create animosity towards the Jewish people. Got it. Agree. However, Maimonides says, and by the way, this is the first time in the Laws of Foreign Worship, this is the first time he brings down this concept of not differentiating between the two groups. But he says clearly that this is talking when the Jewish people are not sovereign in their land, and they are not a power, a sovereign state, a strong state. That is a different situation. Then we're not even allowed to have Gentiles that do not observe the 7 laws of Noah. They are not allowed to be in our land. So with that said, we saw Maimonides, we saw the Mishnah and the Gemara. So yes, it is true. And we'll just finish off by saying that when we look in the Torah, who's a Jewish law book, and also the Code of Jewish Law by Rabbi Yosef Cairo, we see the same thing, but a little bit of a different language. It is permissible to finance the poor and helpless Gentiles alongside the Jews. It is permissible. It doesn't say that you. It doesn't say that you must. It says it is permissible. This is a change of the language of the Talmud. Very interesting. This language is not only brought in the Torah, it's also brought in the Code of Jewish Law by the Shulchan Aruch. It is permissible to give charity to non-Jews. It is permissible to visit their sick and to bury their dead. This could be found in the Code of Jewish Law, Yoreh Deah, chapter 151, Law 12. Check them out. So therefore, we have our first step that we took into our journey to see who the hell is responsible for this tragedy, for this crime. 1761 Jews murdered every day. We look, we hear more soldiers, more Jews added to the list. Stay tuned. Don't touch that dial till next week.